Welcome, and thank you for attending this afternoon and joining us for today's program, Who Are California's Charter Public School Teachers? I'm Myrna Castrejón, President and CEO of the California Charter Schools Association. Today, I will be joined by Dr. Antoinette Rochester, Associate Director of Research and co-author of CCSA's latest research report, The Face of California's Charter Public School Teachers, and two of the charter public school educators who participated in the report. Wanda Ramirez, second grade teacher in a dual immersion language classroom at El Sol Science and Arts Academy of Santa Ana, and my good friend Randy Palisak, current sixth grade math teacher at James Jordan Middle School in Reseda. Dr. Palisak also founded Synergy Academies, which operates 3 award-winning charter schools in South Los Angeles. So let's get started. We all know that teachers are the lifeblood of our classrooms and leave indelible marks on the lives of the children that they teach, decisions, experiences, learning that can last and echo across generations. Not only do they have direct contact with students on a daily basis, but they also represent the public face of a school alongside their administrators. Even though teachers have such a vital role in education, their direct voices are often missing in the existing research and political discourse about charter public schools and education policy in general. This report takes a deep look at those amazing educators that make up the charter public school educator workforce. Now, in case you didn't know, there are approximately 30,000 charter public school teachers in California that educate approximately 685,000 students every day, making up 10% of the state's public teacher workforce. So the purpose of today's event is to take a deeper look into the demographics of who teachers are across the charter sector and hear directly for those deeper stories from 2 charter school educators about their own lived experience. Who are our teachers? What made them choose this career path? What more can we be doing to support teachers in their efforts to teach their students more effectively and deliver on the transformative power of public charter schools? Now, in my work, I have the privilege of seeing charter schools across the state, and without question, the best experience of every school visit is to be able to walk into classrooms and see the bright faces of students that are engaged in their education and congratulate and cheer on the valiant teachers leading those classrooms. The joy and inspiration that I see in the eyes of students is a direct reflection of the teacher who leads them. It's our role as supporters and advocates for California's public education system to help not just find the right individuals, to entice them and invite them and embrace them to enter the teacher workforce, but to support them once they're in the classroom. That's why we at CCSA believe that this research and what it uncovers and the lessons we are called to are so important. With that, I'd like to start off today's event with one of the co-authors of The Face of California's Charter Public School Teachers and CCSA's own Associate Director of Research, Dr. Antoinette Rochester. Thank you for joining us, Tony.
Thank you so much for having me on here, Myrna. It's definitely a pleasure and an honor.
Well, I'm so excited. It's my honor to talk to you more deeply about this major report that you've co-authored here. Now, let's talk a little bit about what the findings say. Like, one of the main findings from the report is that charter school teachers enjoy the flexibility and autonomy to be creative in that classroom because of the charter model. In your interviews, did you hear interesting examples of how teachers are harnessing this flexibility?
Yeah, so I'm going to give one specific example, and then I'm also going to give a broader example that I think illustrates and alludes to why many of these teachers are staying at charter schools. So there was one teacher that we interviewed specifically. She teaches art class, and she first started talking about how when she was going into college, she was unsure about the major that she wanted, but she knew she was interested in animation. But she felt so discouraged because she didn't have the career background through K through 12 to kind of support her within that college career path. And so because of that, she herself decided not to even focus in on that. But then when she became a teacher, an art teacher specifically at a charter school, she realized that she can incorporate animation within her classroom instruction. And she's found such joy and pleasure in being able to use animation to different ways to teach art, and she was talking about specifically when talking to her admin about asking like, is it okay if I do this? Is it okay and do that? And then she realized that her admin was just so supportive, and their biggest thing was just, as long as you're safe, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're making sure the curriculum is getting taught, but as long as you're safe and the students are enjoying it, to just bring this all these different ideas. So I felt like that was one of the greatest examples, just because to see how something that was personally happened to her and how she's able to stop the, I don't want to say dismantle it, but to not repeat the cycle, right? Like sometimes if we don't get to do something within our K through 12 experience, we feel disheartened to try to change that, but how she's able to like change that and allow other students to see that animation and just approach art in a non-traditional way that some people may not see it. And then another example was, there was a teacher within a grade school level, and she was talking about like within herself, she believes that she's just a creative soul, and how creativity is just a part of her natural and authentic being. And then when approaching teaching, she likes to incorporate that within her classroom lessons. And so being at a charter school allows her to have that flexibility, or that space where she can allow herself to be present, but then at the same token, make sure that students are learning what they need to do in a way that she feels is natural to her. And that was something that a lot of teachers were kept on alluding to, that they wanted to approach a curriculum in a very natural manner that the students themselves can identify with. So that could even be examples of historically marginalized communities being able to bring in examples of representation within the classroom that may not traditionally be in there, but allowing students to feel like they can have a voice. And that's a certain type of flexibility they were able to find at charters.
I love that intersection, like without some form of creativity, if you can't be creative, that you don't feel like you have agency. But if you have that flexibility to be able to really pour your passion into and unleash your creativity, that ultimately becomes a way for you to feel like you have more say and more agency, which all teachers tell us that they want and need much more. That totally makes sense, Tony. And thank you for those examples. Now, you've touched on an issue that I want to dive a little bit deeper on. You use the word representation. Representation is a key theme that we know. I mean, it's common sense, right? Folks say that teachers will be more effective, that students will be able to learn better and more effectively in a more grounded way if there is better representation. Can you tell us more about what you learned about the different types of representation in charter public schools and why it's so important in the teaching workforce?
Yes, Myrna, so you highlighted a key point, that representation is something that we always hear about within education. So similar to traditional public schools, charter schools do have a higher white teacher population that are accounting for roughly over 50%. However, when you're looking at degree level attainment at charter schools, teachers that racially identify as Pacific Islanders had a higher degree level attainment, equating for 69% of having associate's degree or higher, followed by Latinx teachers that had it at 67%. If we're looking at teachers that racially identify as Asians, they were more likely to have a graduate degree, equating for 45%, followed by teachers that identify as Filipino or African American at 42%. And although Indigenous teachers equated for a smaller percent population size, when looking at our data, Indigenous teachers that work at charter schools were more likely to be tenured faculty. So to get to your question about why this is important, recently, Dr. Betita Love quoted a tweet that said, according to the Bureau of Economics, it was found that just having one Black teacher in elementary school increases the likelihood of a Black student enrolling in college by 13%. That's just one teacher can have such an influence in the fact of just 13%. So just thinking about if they had two Black teachers, or 50, just in a larger sense of just looking at Black students, but then also thinking about other historically marginalized communities, what that representation can mean for Indigenous students that may not be as racially present within certain classrooms, but just having that space of representation. And a lot of the teachers that we interviewed, they alluded to the fact that representation was a key point as to why they entered the teacher workforce, either the lack thereof or seeing it. So some that did have a teacher that did racially identify as themselves, they felt so empowered. And they felt like the teacher could understand them if that's either culturally or dealing with language barriers. And then teachers that did not have that representation, they brought up how that was such a big point to them of just not being able to feel seen and kind of feeling isolated within their classroom and wanting to dismantle that. And then another point that one of the teachers brought up that I think is sometimes not frequently acknowledged within representation, but it's still very much important, is that that's representation within socioeconomic status. And I think because it's not at the forefront, we tend to not think of it as something that has such an impact on students, but it can have such a massive impact. And I love that one of the teachers had brought that up, of just how that has such an influence on how students are when they come into the classroom, and how when teachers are able to connect with students, right, students feel comfortable enough to even have those discussions because they feel like the teachers themselves might have some form of understanding, either personally or know of a situation. It allows the students to perform better academically, which is what we see. We see students to be more engaged within the classroom. We see student prison pipeline starts to decrease. We see social justice starts to be more incorporated within the classroom. So those are just some key points as to why representation is important and how it's having a positive influence on charter schools.
And that makes complete sense, Tony, especially as we know that when you anchor from lived experience, whether it's economic, whether it's immigration status, or other like race or ethnicity or home language, even, that those can be such gateway factors for connection. And if we learned anything, from the pandemic, was how much human relationships really matter. And I really appreciate you bringing that sort of dimension into the focus around how to deal with these issues that go beyond just like the data or demographics or facts, right? But really uncover the layers on how we build bridges with each other, to each other in this process of teaching and learning. So that raises the question, thinking about all of these things and what teachers are telling you that truly matters, especially teachers of color, especially teachers from diverse economic backgrounds. What are some of the ways that policymakers or school leaders can increase the degree to which teachers and staff are better equipped to represent the students that they serve?
Yeah, so I think California, and then even nationally, there's a big awareness that there needs to be an increase in recruiting teachers from diverse backgrounds. And I think California is doing a great job in making that at the forefront. And I think there's ways to continue to support that, is to continue to promote teacher residency programs, which is something that can always increase the teacher pipeline. Within California, there's a state program called Grow Your Own, which can start at the high school level, or it can start within the charter schools or schools within themselves for non-credential staff to be able to get their credentialing and to make that easier within that space. But then also big recruitment and intentional recruiting at historically Black colleges, universities, which I'm an alumni of, and very proud of that space to help diversify the teacher pipeline. Looking at schools that intentionally serve or have serving a high population of Latinx students, and also looking at community colleges. I think that sometimes we forget that community colleges are a pool of students there that are just waiting to be able to transition either to a traditional college and or just using there as an intermediate space. And then also looking at CTE programs to figuring out if there's ways to recruit students from there as well.
I love that. And certainly there's a lot of discussion right now also around, especially for prospective teachers from economically challenged communities, that the barrier of the cost of college and credentialing on top of that, and all of these issues around creating better pathways to access remains a really important point. And I'm glad to hear that there's some beginning conversation in the national and state policy landscapes to begin to dismantle some of those barriers. But I love your point about starting from home and building those pipelines with our own charter alumni. We are so proud of the fact that we produce a tremendous cohort of powerful charter students that then go on to succeed in college and career. Bringing them back is absolutely a really important dimension of what coming home really looks like. So I appreciate those suggestions. And we're going to hear more about how to get your full part 1 and part 2 report. Very excited to share this with our audience and with everyone that's interested in diving deeper into a report that absolutely centers the voice of teachers and cuts through the politics and policy conversations to really let them speak for themselves and speak loudly and clearly. Thank you so much, Tony, for taking the time today and for all the hard work that you put into this very important research.
Thank you for having me, Myrna.
Now, joining us next are 2 distinguished educators, Wanda Ramirez, who teaches a 2nd grade dual immersion language classroom, that's a mouthful, at El Sol Science and Arts Academy in Santa Ana in Orange County. And Randy Palasak, who is a former charter public school founder and leader and a current 6th grade math teacher at James Jordan Middle School in Reseda. Thank you so much to both of you for taking the time to talk to us about your experiences as educators and your thoughts and reflections on teaching in California's charter public schools in these challenging times, let's say. And thank you so much for your participation in this great research that Dr. Tony just talked to us about. So let me start with Wanda, if you don't mind. Wanda, why did you choose to work at a charter public school?
I actually have worked in charter schools my entire teaching career. I'm currently in my 12th year of teaching, and I entered the charter world through Teach for America, and I stayed at a charter until now. I think what I enjoy the most about working in charter schools from my experience is what the report mentions with Tony is the autonomy and the willingness from school leaders to let me try new things in my classroom. If I have an idea or a program I want to pilot, I can go to them, and they are always willing to hear the research and the data behind what I'm trying to do with my students.
Wanda, if you'll allow me a short little personal birdwalk, thank you so much personally for the work that you do at El Sol and with other dual immersion charter school programs. I'm sure that most people in our audience aren't even aware that back in the day when bilingual education was banned in California, because of the mega waiver that charter schools benefited from, charter schools were the only schools in the state who could still, under the mega waiver, intentionally create communities of learning that focused on ESL and bilingual students and the movement for dual immersion, which now we understand as multilingualism and a huge asset to students' ability to continue to be fully literate in two languages. That flame was kept alive because of California's public charter schools across the state. And I would love nothing more than to see so many of those programs flourish and replicate, and the kind of work that you're doing at El Sol, which is so groundbreaking, to be across the state in really intentional ways with districts, with county offices of education, because you're really onto something there. And charter schools bravely held on to that amazing pathway for students. And I know that you will continue to share your best practices and what you're continuing to do in this amazing school along those lines. Okay, enough of my soapbox, but thank you for that. Let's bring in Randy into the conversation. Randy, I've known you for what, 15 years? I've seen you blossom, grow, learn, teach, lead. Right now, you are teaching sixth grade again. What made you want to go back to the classroom after founding your own charter school and growing it into a 3-school network?
Absolutely. And what made me go back to becoming a classroom teacher even after founding my own school, I think the reason for that is I've always been a teacher at heart. So teaching is actually a second career for me. I was actually a business major at USC and worked in an office for a year and made the career change into education. And I was actually a classroom teacher with LA Unified. So that was my entry into the education world, was as a traditional public school teacher. And after 7 years, my wife, Meg, and I, we found out about charter schools through Jonathan Williams at the Accelerated School. And that was our inspiration to start up a school. And I'm actually looking at the education code right now, that Charter Schools Act of 1992. And it actually says, it is the intent of the legislature enacting this part to provide opportunities for teachers, which is what Meg and I were, parents, pupils, and community members to establish and maintain schools that operate independently from the existing school district structure in order to improve people learning, among other things. So even when we decided to start our charter school as administrators, we were still teachers at heart. Yes. So when we saw the need for students to improve their reading because we were struggling with reading, it was Meg and I who took on the tutoring of the students, who did the intervention and so on. So we did that, and we were both teachers at heart, especially including myself. And after running Synergy for 10 years, after starting elementary, middle, and high school, and as you mentioned, they're all very successful, picked up national Blue Ribbon Awards and so on, I decided to leave the school since they were established and were able to function on their own. And I went into curriculum design for a couple of years. And when the opportunity opened up to go back into the classroom at James Jordan Middle School to teach an area where I had an area of expertise in mathematics, I decided to jump back into that because even as an administrator, I still had that teacher mindset in me. So when the opportunity came back to go back into the classroom, I jumped on that opportunity right away.
I think you've just hit on why your synergy schools were so successful, keeping that teacher mindset. Beautiful work. I so appreciate what you've done. Wanda, let's go back to your perspective on why dual immersion is important, or why is it that the program at El Sol deserves support and a good spotlight?
Well, I think it's important for me to work at a Spanish immersion school because I think I understand the value of being bilingual. And for most of our students, it's keeping their heritage language and being proud of their roots. I think for a long time in schools, as you mentioned, native language was seen as a barrier, especially for English language learners like myself. And I think that perspective has changed throughout the years. Now, a student's native language is seen more as an asset rather than a barrier. And as a dual immersion educator, I have the opportunity to keep changing that mindset and to teach my students to embrace their native language and to empower them to use their entire linguistic abilities.
I love it. As a fellow English language learner, I so appreciate the work that you and El Sol are doing. Thank you so much. But I want to dive a little bit deeper on you've talked a reference rather context, right? Like students don't come in a little box that's neatly, differentiated from or outside of the context from where they live, where they grew up, who they are, and their heritage and cultural assets. Talk to me a little bit about how does it work in El Sol in terms of how your model integrates the importance of community with students, parents, and the community at large.
Yeah, so El Sol Science and Arts Academy is actually a community school. So we have many partnerships with the surrounding community organizations. For example, we have a wellness center on campus that serves the community and families from our school. We have a food bank on campus called El Mercado that offers food free of cost to community members and families. And I believe there's a lot of power that comes from building those relationships with the community, and that students see the benefit that comes from helping your community. We want them to be proud of where they live and become advocates for their community. We're actually a K-8 school, so once they get to middle school, then we have programs like CASA, which stands for Cultura, Aprendizaje, Servicio y Acción. Translated, it's Cultural Learning, Service, and Action. And I think students in that program focus on culturally relevant service learning projects that benefit their community. So for example, last year, their focus was on helping and teaching others about preserving murals around the community and bringing awareness to the importance of those murals and the cultural aspects behind them. So they created a plan how these murals can be preserved and restored, and they presented that plan to city officials. So I think it was extremely powerful for those students to see how their advocacy can bring these really important changes to their community, and they got to live that and see it in action.
I love that. I love that. Truly authentic, embedded, anchored in community. Randy, you've been through all sides, right, of charter life as a founder, as an administrator, working in the district, as a teacher. One of the great challenges, I believe, for how to continue to accelerate recovery from the pandemic is really the question of innovation and equity, of course. So how can, from your different vantage points, Randy, how can charter school leaders rise to the challenge of the moment and foster innovation in the classroom?
I would say that, and to give you some background again, when I was at USA, I was an entrepreneur and marketing major in the business school. Mm-hmm. So my response to that would be to encourage your teachers to be entrepreneurial and give them the opportunity to take risks and to further pursue promising practices. So one example is when I was a founder at Synergy, our second year of operation, our kids were really struggling with reading. And I was an administrator at the school, and one of our teachers came up to me and said, "Hey, have you heard about this program called Reading Counts?" And as an administrator, I had never heard of the program before. So I did a little bit of research, found out about the program, and we saw immediately that this had really good applications at our school. So based on that input that teacher at our school provided to us as administrators, we ran with it, decided to implement that program school-wide. And as a result, the reading level of our students really took off and skyrocketed. And if we had not had ears to listen to our teachers to bring up those innovations, we would never have implemented that program and gotten the results that we've had. And now that I'm a classroom teacher at James Jordan Middle School, it's the same thing. So the admin at our school are really good at listening to the teachers and having them come up with ideas. So we use a program called EdgeElastic, for example, and it's an online assessment platform that one of our teachers learned about, shared it with the entire staff, and we fell in love with it and started using it as a staff. But the free version is great, but there's some features that are not available to the free version that you only get through the paid version. So we took that to admin and say, hey, we could really use these features that are not available on the free version. Is it in our school budget to go ahead and pay for a subscription so we can have full access to this tool? And admin immediately saw the value in that and said, hey, let's go ahead and run with it. You guys did the research as teachers. We'll fully support you with that. So I think just having that entrepreneurial mindset and encouraging your teachers to search for solutions is one way that charter leaders can encourage greater innovation in their schools.
I love it. So entrepreneurial mindset, maintaining, even if you're an administrator or founder, maintaining your teacher mindset around what works for students, preserving and honoring community. All of these are the hallmarks of what charter public schools can continue to do to innovate and center equity in this incredibly challenged moment for all of public education. Thank you so much to both of you. It was really inspiring and insightful to look into your work, and I appreciate the time you have given us and the dedication that you have to your students. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
I also want to thank all of you in our audience who have taken the time out of your busy schedules to gain a few more insights into California's public charter school teacher landscape. Again, thank you to Dr. Tony and to our guests. To read the complete report, The Face of California's Charter Public School Teachers Report Parts 1 and 2, please scan the QR code in the corner of the screen or visit our website at ccsa.org. That's ccsa.org. Thank you again for spending part of your day with us on today's live stream. I am Myrna Castrejón, CEO and President of the California Charter Schools Association. Adelante.